Hey, this is the C&D channel. I'm Chris. This is MMA For You. I'm going to be doing my MMA Q and A for September 2013. If you want to submit questions for October 2013, just put them in the comments below. I'd like to give some shout outs to Born to Fight Kimonos, Rick 1982, Birdman 23, C. Joe, ZHB 1989, Philarm 99, Blackett 123, Chituis, Everton Black, Justin Brunson, Late Night MMA, Freedy McGee, Florentino Ariza, Chechen One Fighters, and F. Brizzle. Okay, I got two questions today, and let's get started. Okay, Insect asks, a while back you said that the UFC Middleweight Division is not a weak division. What do you think about the division now? Okay, yeah, a while back with Dave, I did do a show, I believe it was a Q and A show, that where I said that the middleweight division is not a weak or thin division. I said that it was a solid division. I didn't feel that it was by any means a stacked division. I'll get to my definitions of thin, weak, and stacked sometime around here. But yeah, I still feel that it is a solid division and that it has actually gotten a lot better, and I'll explain that too. A couple facts about the UFC Middleweight Division. According to the UFC website, there are currently 59 fighters, middleweight fighters signed to the UFC. I looked at that list though. There's guys like Brian Stan on there, Hoyce Gracie, Louise Kane, Tom LeBlanc. So you want to minus 4 or 5 fighters from there. John Howard's there, even though he's probably going to fight in welterweight next. So I'd say there's probably like 53 to 55 actual UFC middleweights in the division. That actually still makes it the third largest weight class behind lightweight and welterweight. All of this is subjective, as far as like if the division is strong or weak. In my opinion, it's the fourth deepest division behind lightweight, welterweight, and featherweight as far as quality of talent is concerned. That's a very subjective opinion. I will say that I do feel it is deeper than bantamweight, men's bantamweight, light heavyweight, flyweight, and heavyweight. I've heard arguments, saying that some people think that heavyweight is deeper as far as quality of talent is concerned. One reason I heard is that heavyweights have one-punch knockout power. They're able to knock out opponents, and therefore, are just more, that's a sign of a higher quality of talent, I've heard from people thinking that the division is a stacked division at this point. And like I said, I think it's more somewhere in the middle. So I'll also explain my reasoning behind a lot of this. Why I think it's more deeper than bantamweight, why it's deeper than light heavyweight. The thing is, too, with the UFC middleweight division, there were in my opinion, three big factors, or four actually, big factors that really helps the division. One, 205ers moving down to 185. You just got Lyoto Machida because of that. Tim Bosch, Mark Munoz. Bisping was actually a 205er. I hear Gegard Mousasi's going to cut down to 185. The other factors are the Ultimate Fighter Season 17. That's the one with like Uriah Hall, Clint Hester, and those guys. The Ultimate Fighter Brazil 1. You got Cesar Mutante from that. And the one of the really big ones is Strikeforce. It brought a lot of fighters to the division. The Strikeforce middleweights that still are in the UFC would be Jacare, Luke Rockhold, who are both top 10 guys. Tim Kennedy, who's a top 11 to 15 guy. Lawrence Larkin, strong prospect. Derek Brunson, I don't know if he's a great prospect. good mid-tier guy, you know. Kung Lee, fun action fighter, get, you know, name value. Yoel Romero, that guy, if he was younger, he'd be awesome. And Trevor Smith, he's just pretty much an action fighter at this point. You know, the thing is, like I said, I think it's deeper than bantamweight, and the reason why I say that is because with men's bantamweight, some of the fighters from bantamweight did move down to flyweight. 3 of their top 10 guys, actually, Demetrius Johnson, Joseph Benavidez, and more recently, Scott Jorgensen, moved down to flyweight. And then they also lost John Dodson, who's a good prospect. And then they also lost 2 mid-tier guys in Darren Oyama, Chris Carriasso. They also lost Vina to flyweight also. So you lost a good, like, what? How many was that? 7 fighters right there of different levels of skill, you know. But as far as just numbers go, that's if flyweight, you know, I should have checked. I think they only have somewhere in the 30s. That's actually a majority of the division. You know, that's a fifth of the division or so that they lost. So I think that really hurt bantamweight. I will say that the top 4 guys in bantamweight are incredible fighters, though. Renan Barão, Uriah Faber, Michael McDonald, and Dominic Cruz are really good. I think the level of skill kind of tapers off after those guys. You know, like I like Brad Pickett, Eddie Wineland, Rafael Sanchal. You know, TJ Dillashaw's a good prospect in the division. That's the other thing with that division too. There really aren't that many prospects in the division. You know, I mean, there's guys like Chico Camus, TJ Dillashaw's a good one. Hugo Viana is pretty good. You know, these like pretty good prospects, but you don't have a lot of them. But yeah, and like I said, their top 10 ranges from like good to really good to great. However, middleweight, if you look at their top fighters, nothing to scoff at here either. Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva, Leo Machido's moving down, Jacare, and even though Vitor Belfort does move from divisions, I think most consider him a middleweight. Luke Rockhold, Yushin Okami, solid, you know. And a lot of people will give me flack for this. I don't think Michael Bisping is a top 5 middleweight, but I think he's a top 10 guy. I think the problem is definitely his resume. I mean, his biggest wins are against Alan Belcher and Brian Stann. Brian Stann was a top 10 guy when Bisping beat him, making Bisping a top 10 fighter, but, you know, he does have those losses to Sonnen. You know, he can't win the big one. That's the thing. I don't think he's a top 5 guy, but definitely a top 10 guy. And I'll even go so far as to say he does have elite level. If anything about Michael Bisping's elite level, it's definitely his counter wrestling. His takedown defense is really good. His ability to get back to his feet is really good as well. Because I know a lot of people, they don't like the guy, but like I do feel that he is skilled. He can't win the big one though, but he is skilled. I think he's a good like 7 to 10, you know, top 7 to 10 type of guy, to be perfectly honest with you. And then you got like Mark Munoz, Tim Bosch, solid fighter. Francis Cormon just got into the top 10 by beating a good fighter in Costa Philippou. You got some good top 11 to 15 guys like Alan Belcher, Tim Kennedy. Definitely nothing to scoff at, and I definitely feel, especially around their top 5, arguably their top 6, are really strong fighters. You know, are really, like I would say, excellent fighters. So yeah, that's the thing that really helps middleweight right now. They definitely got a big influx of talent, and to go with that, and I'll actually segue to light heavyweight. Here's a list of fighters in their 20s in middleweight right now. So you got a lot of young fighters. You got Chris Weidman, 29 years old. Luke Barnett, 25 years old. Derek Brunson, 29 years old. Andrew Craig, 27 years old. Cesar Mutante Ferreira, 28 years old. Uriah Hall, 29 years old. Clint Hester, 26 years old. Michael Kuiper, 24 years old. Lawrence Larkin, 26 years old. Kyle Magalesh, 25 years old. Honey Marks, 25 years old. Antonio Braga Neto, 25 years old. Thiago Badal Perpetuo, 25 years old. Luke Rockhold, 28 years old. Josh Saman, 25 years old. Brad Tavares, 25 years old. It's a total of 16 fighters and still under 20s. A lot of them 25, 26, 27 or younger. I will say this though, before, it's like, well, these guys suck. These guys aren't that great. Yeah, here's the thing, okay? Before we get into that, let me just say, I don't think that some of these fighters are going to make it into UFC. I don't think Michael Kuiper is going to stay in the UFC, to be perfectly honest with you. Kyle Magalesh, probably not going to stay in the UFC. So there are some guys, some of these guys will probably be perpetual mid-tier guys, maybe a Luke Barnett or Derek Brunson, tough to say. Uriah Hall could be cut if he loses again. But I will say, Chris Weidman, of course, and Luke Rockhold are already in the top 10. Lawrence Larkin is a guy I can see in the top 10. Brad Tavares, I keep saying it, dark horse prospect of the division. Antonio Braga Neto, with that guy's jiu-jitsu skills, if he can get some stand-up too, maybe, Honey Marks, even though he's a grinder, he doesn't really know how to use his size. He does have strong Brazilian jiu-jitsu, actually, and trains at a good camp. If he can put it together, he could potentially break into the top 10. Cesar Mutante, not a bad fighter per se, he's not this great prospect. Like I said, there aren't many Chris Weidman, Johnny Hendricks, Phil Davis type prospects on this list or anything like that. But you do have solid prospects for sure. Andrew Craig, I think, is not a bad fighter at all. I think Clint Hester already has the hands. I think if he can get his grappling better, he's only 26. The reason why the age thing's so important is your prime years are 27 to 32 or something to that nature. Someone quote me there, but a lot of these guys just aren't even in their athletic prime yet. So having youth in the division really helps. That's the problem with light heavyweight. If you actually look overall at the fighters, let's look at the top 10. You do have John Jones, Phil Davis, and Alexander Gustafsson still under 20s and will probably stay in the top division for a while. However, even guys like Glover Teixeira, that guy's 33 or something like that. Shogun, he's actually only 30. His body is 50, and the same thing goes with Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. I think he's in his more closer to early to mid 30s. Dan Henderson, he's getting up there in years. Rashad Evans getting, more towards the mid 30s. Then you got guys that used to be some of the bigger names, because light heavyweight was the money division, but then guys like Forrest Griffin retired, Rampage left, Tito left. So a lot of they still have a lot of name value in that division for sure. But as far as if you look across the board, you're not getting a lot of youth in the division. Let's look at the 11 to 20 guys. Okay, you got Ryan Bader. He's a good fighter. I don't know if he's gonna get past where he is right now though, but he's in his 20s if I'm not mistaken. Then you got guys like James Tahuna. He's fighting Shogun next, That guy, good fighter, but the guy's in his 30s, early to mid 30s. Jimmy Manuwa, undefeated, mid 30s, Ryan Jimmo, early to mid 30s. OSP, he's 30 years old right now. Not a bad fighter, good prospect. But you're just not getting this, really good youth. There's no youth movement in that division. their mid-tier guys consist of guys like Igor Prokrayak, Fabio Maldonado, Anthony Parash, Joey Beltran. That's their like mid-level guys, So yeah, I think that the light heavyweight division, they just haven't been replaced. The top guys aren't getting replaced fast enough by newer, younger talent. That's why I pointed out that these fighters in their 20s. One thing about the top fighters in middleweight, a lot of them are actually in their 30s. Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold are not. Everyone else is pretty much in their 30s. Chael Sonnen, he's in light heavyweight. He's in mid-30s. But yeah, you have Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. The thing is, when I say replace, I don't mean you're going to get another Anderson Silva. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is you will get a guy there that is maybe a great fighter, that will break into the top 10. You have a lot of guys that are young that can break into the top 10 that could become elite fighters, And that's not even including guys like Elvis Mutajic, Vasilevsky, I forgot his first name. He had a really hard to pronounce first name. Vasilevsky, he fought in Bellator. There aren't too many middleweights out there, but there's still a couple out there that are pretty solid and young too. So that's the thing with light heavyweight, that I just think they don't have enough youth in the division, and the fighters are just getting older, and they're just not getting replaced by younger guys. Like I said, I list 16 fighters in their 20s. Some of them in their late 20s, a lot in their just mid-20s. Some of them probably won't make it into UFC. I think others will. I can see a Josh Saman being a top 11 to 15 guy. Andrew Craig, same thing. I can see guys, at the very least, some guys are going to go. I can see guys with staying power at the very least. Some of these guys will probably not make it. I'm worried about Uriah Hall, for example. That guy, mentally, he just, he's just not there. He has all the skill in the world. It's just, I don't know, he can't put it all together for some reason. But other guys, yeah, I see some staying power with a lot of these guys, and I see top 10 potential with other guys as well. Another thing to note about middleweight, December, the New Year's Eve, the New Year's pay-per-view, or the pay-per-view that happens on like New Year's weekend or the week before. The very last pay-per-view of December. What's the main event? It's not Rousey versus Tate. It's a middleweight fight. Anderson Silva versus Chris Weidman 2. One of the biggest fights of the year and one of the most anticipated fights of the year. One of them, arguably, is a middleweight fight. So main events. There's a lot of main event middleweight fights. Machida Munoz, yeah, main event right there. So yeah. I think it, going back to the division, what do you think about the division now? Solid division. If you're going to go with the term thin, if you're talking about quantity, that just doesn't hold any water. It's the third largest weight class as far as quantity is concerned, behind lightweight and welterweight. As far as numbers go, it has more than enough fighters in that division. The argument then goes to is as far as quality of talent, like their skill-wise, does that make it a weak division, a solid division, or strong division? It's tough. Let's look at some facts, okay? Welterweight obviously has guys like Johnny Hendricks, Jake Allenberger, Rory McDonald, Eric Silva. They're moving on up. They're young, exciting fighters, and even guys like Hung Yu Lim, Gunnar Nelson, and welterweight. I mean, you got so much good talent at welterweight right now. Carlos Condit, Matt Brown, I mean, just George St. Pierre, of course, You got so much great talent at welterweight. It's definitely not welterweight. It's not stacked like that, where just across the board you have really strong talent. And even like new guys coming into the division, like Hung Yu Lim. 2 knee KOs, man. And this guy, some up-and-comer, lightweight. Their top 10 guys now are all new guys. Rafael Dos Anjos, TJ Grant, Habib Nurmagomedov. I mean, there's Thompson there, obviously, and, like, Maynard. But then, like, Melendez is up there, He's still he's been in the game for a while, but, he's still, like, new to the top, Josh Thompson's a staple there. Anthony Pettis, Got some young, new talent. Benson Henderson. You got a lot of young talent at the very top of the division. Like, the lightweight of Maynard, Frankie Edgar, BJ Penn, and those guys, that's gone. You got all these new guys in a short period of time. Middleweight is not that, Featherweight, it got this young talent, Ricardo Lamas, Cub Swanson, Korean Zombie, Dustin Poirier, Frankie Edgar's there now, Aldo, you got a lot of, so as far as quality of talent is concerned, middleweight's not that, but you once again, you can't deny Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva, Jacare, I mean, those are good guys. Rockhold, Vitor, Machido's moving down. Those are very good guys, nonetheless. That's the thing. So, no, I don't think that's weak. As far as I'm concerned, they have a youth movement, They have, like, a lot of guys in their 20s. There's a big influx of talent that came into the division. And they're all prospects that range from good to very good, Some of them not so good, So, no, I don't think it's a weak division whatsoever. I think it's somewhere more in the middle. I feel it's a very solid division. I think it's definitely stronger than, say, bantamweight, flyweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight, to be perfectly honest with you, in my opinion. So, yeah. I still think it's a very solid division. Okay, on to the next question. Jay Pleaser 1 asks, what are your thoughts about the UFC cutting Yushin Okami? Okay, before I get into that, I would like to reiterate what Dana White had to say about cutting Yushin Okami. Okay, so here we go. He's been with us forever. He was always a tough guy and was right up there, but it's almost like he'd become a gatekeeper. I like Okami, and you've heard me say this many times, that a win over Yushin Okami meant something. But he was never able to get over the hump and win one of those significant fights. We have a lot of guys coming in, and I've been saying this all year. We have a full roster, and there are guys who deserve opportunities. When you bring guys in, someone has to go. That's why these fights are so meaningful. Okay, well, let's dissect some of this right now. I'm going to ask a really serious question here, and, this is a very serious question. What's wrong being a gatekeeper? Honest truth. What's wrong being a gatekeeper? A high-level gatekeeper. Does the UFC not employ gatekeepers? I believe there's a heavyweight named Roy Nelson, total gatekeeper. Loses to Stipe Miocic, Frank Mir, Fabricio Verdum, beats guys like Congo, guys like Mitrione, Brendan Schaub. Yep, yeah. So they have a gatekeeper right there. What's Josh Koscheck's role in the division these days? 2 losses in a row. Is he going to get a title shot anytime soon? Probably not. He just lost to Robbie Lawler in his last outing. I think he's something of a gatekeeper at this point. Donald Cerrone, kind of a gatekeeper at this point. Loses to the likes of Nate Diaz. Just lost to Rafael Dos Anjos. Will beat your Dennis Sievers, Jeremy Stevens, KJ Noons. Something of a gatekeeper at this point, you know? So, yeah. Matt Brown, for the longest time, was a gatekeeper. You know, he was on a 3 or 4 fight losing streak, all losses by submission. You know, they kept him. What's wrong being a gatekeeper? What's wrong being a high-level gatekeeper? Yes, a win over Yushin Okami does mean something. Jacare's better now, and his brand is bigger now, or his name value is a little bigger because he knocked out Yushin Okami. You know, Yushin Okami is that good litmus test. And I'll say this: if you can't beat Yushin Okami, you probably can't beat Chris Weidman. You know, that's honestly the way I see it. Nothing wrong with Yushin Okami being a gatekeeper, being a consistent top 10 guy. I see nothing wrong with that, to be honest with you. Most guys won't reach what he's reached. And going with that, he was never able to get over the hump and win one of those significant fights. Not true, actually. How did he get a UFC Middleweight title shot? He had to get one of those big wins. That big win was over Nate Marquardt, when Marquardt was in the top 10. That's what happened. He beat Munoz during that time, too, during that win streak. And then after he lost to Anderson and Boach, and I thought he's totally killing like Tim Boach up to his loss, up to when he got TKO'd pretty much. He beat Hector Lombard. He beat Alan Belcher, I think Lombard was a top 10. Alan Belcher, solid 11 to 15 guy. So yeah, he can win against very good competition as well. You want to also talk about guys who can't get over the hump? How about this guy named Michael Bisping? Oh, you keep him? He can't get over the hump. He lost to Chael Sonnen, Rashad Evans, Vanderlei Silva, Vitor Belfort, and Dan Henderson. Can never get over the hump. There are a lot of guys who cannot get over the hump in the UFC. I'd say 95% of UFC fighters will probably never fight for a title. Jake Ellenberger, knocked out by Martin Kampmann. Got a win after that. Is it 1 or 2? Then he just lost to Roy McDonald. He can't get over the hump. You know? There's probably a lot more good. Donald Cerrone couldn't beat Nate Diaz when he really needed it. Couldn't beat Rafael Dos Anjos when he really needed it. Can't get over the hump. There's a lot of guys that will almost never. Clay Guida during his streak when he could never get over the hump. I mean, you can say that about 95% of the fighters that they can't get over the hump. Most guys probably will never reach top 10 status. I mean, I'd say 90% of fighters in the UFC will never be a top 10 fighter. You know? Yushin Okami has consistently been able to be a top 10 fighter. Okay. And then he says, we have a full roster and there are guys who deserve opportunities. When you bring guys in, someone has to go. Okay, if someone has to go, why don't you get rid of Brandon Vera? Just lost to Ben Rothwell. Hasn't won a fight since Elliot Marshall. Why not get rid of guys on 2-fight losing streaks? Alistair Overeem, 2 embarrassing losses to Bigfoot and Travis Brown. Hector Lombard, lots of hype. Lost to Tim Bosch and Yushin Okami. Okay, if you're saying, those guys have Josh Koscheck, 2 losses as well. Those guys have big names, they're justifiable, that's why you keep them. Okay. Seth Baczynski, 2-fight losing streak. Why does he get another fight in the UFC? Why do 2 guys on 3-fight losing streaks and George Santaropoulos and KJ Noons get another fight in the UFC? They're expendable. Frank Mir is on a 3-fight losing streak. Yeah, he has a name. I can probably name more guys. I'm just thinking on the top of my head. Chris Lieben, 3-fight losing streak, looking like a shell of his former self. Uriah Hall, 2-fight losing streak, just kind of a dud at this point. Can't get rid of him. I mean, seriously, there's a lot of guys you can get rid. If someone has to go, why get rid of the guy who was on a 3-fight winning streak and lost to freaking Jacare? You know, this top 5 fighter and a potential title challenger, you know. Jacare is a great fighter. You know, he's an elite fighter. Losing to him, you know, is not like it's a respectable loss, you know. That's the thing. You know, if it's a 2-fight losing streak, yeah, you can kind of get it with Yushin Okami. Dude, the guy lost once to friggin' Jacare. You know, he's not losing to some bum or anything like that. Whereas there's other guys like Brandon Vera who just lost to Ben Rothwell, you know. And there's so many other guys that they keep that honestly just don't belong in the UFC. I mean, they're just a lot of lower tier guys that quite honestly just aren't that great, you know. But here's the thing. So here's the argument for cutting Yushin Okami. 1, he's a boring fighter. He does not have an aesthetically pleasing style of fighting. 2, he doesn't have a big enough fan base to justify his pay. I believe when he beat Lombard, he got 42. So he got like around 80,000, you know, 84,000, somewhere around there. I'm pretty sure that's a number. I'm not 100% sure. So here's, you know, so obviously he does carry something of a price tag. It's not a huge price tag by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not low, you know. And he doesn't have the fan base to really justify keeping him. But then, if you're going to go with that, you have to go with like the sport versus entertainment aspect of the argument here. You know, if the UFC sees itself as a sport and they advertise itself as the best MMA fighters fighting the best MMA fighters, well, Yushin Okami, according to your own ranking system, is number 6 in your rankings, and in everyone else's rankings is a top 10 fighter. He is one of the best, okay? He is too good for Bellator. I think he kills Shamaika. I think he beats David Brandt, Alice Mutapchik, and Jesse Taylor and World Series Fighting, and anyone that ONE FC can throw at him. He's too good to be fighting for those guys, to be perfectly honest with you. So, you know, there's kind of this sport versus entertainment thing. Obviously, like I said, he's kind of a boring fighter, and it's a business decision. Even with the business decision thing, I think that there's something to be said here. I would like to see Luke Rockhold fight Yushin Okami. I think if Luke Rockhold got a win over Okami, it'd really build him up. Vitor Belfort, Yushin Okami, not a bad fight. If you want to give Francis Carmon a big test to bring up his name, Yushin Okami. Bisping versus Okami. Machida versus Okami. All good fights. You can put in like a co-main event status. Or maybe main event, one of their Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports 2 cards. His name value isn't so low that you can't do that. And like I said, if a Luke Rockhold, for example, or Francis Carmon beats Yushin Okami, their name value rises. So there's still business to be made with Yushin Okami, you know, if you want to use him, right? Could he destroy other prospects? Sure. Yeah, I don't doubt it, you know. He, in a sense, he's like John Fitch in that way. However, like I said, he's one of the best. I think he should be fighting the best. I think that you can use him as a gatekeeper, and I don't think there's a problem with that. I really don't. The UFC employs high-level gatekeepers. It's not uncommon for that to happen. You know, most guys won't reach what Yushin Okami will reach. You know, so yeah. What do I think about the UFC cutting Yushin Okami? I'm not in favor of the move. I understand the other aspect of the argument, that he is kind of a boring fighter and whatnot. I think that that part is not as relevant as his ranking merits, as the fact that he's was on a 3-fight win streak over good competition before losing to Jacare. And I think he's constantly been a top 10 guy. So, yeah. And I think he's one of the best Japanese fighters to come into the UFC, if not the best Japanese fighter in the UFC. So, yeah, I don't think it's a good move. I think they could, if you're going to go with, when you bring guys in, someone has to go. I think there are, if I look through the UFC roster, I am sure I can find, your Sam Cecilia's, your Mike Wilkinson's, I don't know if Neil Magny's still there, your Cody Donovan's. I could probably name a bunch of guys that bring nothing, absolutely nothing to the UFC. And that's no offense to those guys. I mean, I'm just saying it from a business standpoint. Hey, I'm sorry, they don't bring much to the UFC. They're just kind of there to fill cards. Yushin Okami, at least if you're a high-level gatekeeper, you have a role in the UFC. That's the thing. And he's a top 10 guy. So, yeah, not big on that move at all. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for my MMA Q and A for September 2013. If you have any comments, just leave them below. And that's it for MMA For You. Thank you guys very much.